You are listening to the Vibrant Life Podcast, episode number 6. The Vibrant Life. Hey you, welcome to the Vibrant Life Podcast. I'm Emily Romrell, and I'm doing great. Life is good. I love spring. I love watching the world wake up after the long sleep of winter. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The earth laughs in flowers," and I think that's true. And blooms are popping out everywhere. The air is fresh and new with possibilities, and everything feels more hopeful in spring. Also, as we move into a new season, spring cleaning may be on your mind. It's a great thing to declutter your life and feel fresh and new, just like the weather. So if you're interested in doing some work to declutter your internal world, consider using the Vibrant Life Goal Planner. I made an all-inclusive goal tracker, calendar, and personal journal to monitor my own progress, and it's a system that works for me. I know it would help you create your own vibrant life, and a video of the planner and links to buy one are included in the show notes, so check that out if you're interested. Things are moving along with the podcast. We're at episode 6, people, so I really appreciate the support I've received so far. If you have time, a review on iTunes or Spotify would be spectacular. Thanks so much for helping me reach more listeners and getting the podcast out to as many people as possible. Today we're talking about prospering by degrees, and this is something that I've thought a lot about over a long period of time. I've contemplated the nature of growth and achievement and what it means to become a higher version of yourself and what is required to level up in life. And the truth is that personal development is a process. It doesn't happen instantaneously. If you look at any big success or achievement, you can break it down into building blocks of ideas and actions. And these ideas and actions grow in fascinating ways, and they compound exponentially. Sometimes growth is rapid because the excitement and energy behind the effort are massive, and other times things take longer to develop. But the time frame is not necessarily as important as the process or model it takes to get where you want to go. One of the best examples demonstrating this process of prospering by degrees is the story of Joseph of Egypt. It's an Old Testament tale, so if you practice Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, you're probably familiar with it. It's one of the oldest dramas in history, containing a great amount of wisdom. So Joseph was the second to youngest son of Jacob, who later became Israel. He had 10 older brothers who in society held a higher standing than he did, but Jacob loved Joseph best because he was the son of his favorite wife, Rachel. And basically what you need to know is that Joseph was born into the middle of a large and important family, and like most families, there was some dysfunctional things happening. One of the fascinating things about Joseph is that he had some special talents. He had the ability to both receive prophetic dreams and interpret them. And so Joseph is 17 years old, and he's a shepherd taking care of his father's flocks. It's not really a position of power in the family, but he has a couple of these dreams, and he tells his brothers that he's destined to become a ruler over them. And the brothers, who already envy Joseph because he's the favorite, are understandably pretty upset by this, and so they decide to kill him. There's a couple points I want to make here at the beginning. First of all, Joseph was born into a complicated family. Like all of us, there were both good and bad things about his situation. And sometimes it's easy to blame the circumstances of our birth for the results of where we end up in life. And sure, it can influence the beginning, but ultimately it's our own actions and choices that determine our destiny. And I think that the story of Joseph shows us that. Secondly, Joseph wasn't afraid to use his talents and gifts. It's hard to know the true context from the Bible, but I don't think Joseph was trying to upstage his brothers or cause trouble. I think he was just sharing his experiences with his family. Unfortunately, his efforts were not received well. This happens a lot to us when we first try something new. We make changes in our lives, and the people around us may not be comfortable with it. They are compelled to evaluate how this change affects them, and some of the biggest causes of anger are unmet expectations or unexpected situations. Like one of the best Disney movies ever, The Emperor's New Groove, people don't like to be thrown off their groove. But like Joseph, we shouldn't let that stop us from being true to ourselves, even if at first it seems to make things worse for us. Okay, so the brothers set up this plan to kill Joseph in the desert. They dig a big pit and plan to abandon him there. But while this is happening, they see some Ishmaelites coming and think, hey, maybe we can make some money here. So instead of leaving Joseph to die, they sell him into slavery. And then the brothers take Joseph's famous coat of many colors and smear it with blood from a goat, and they give that coat to Jacob, telling him that Joseph was killed. So things were looking pretty bad for Joseph. You can't get much lower than a slave in life. But he obviously made an impact even to the slave traders because he was sold to a very important man named Potiphar. In the Bible, it describes Potiphar as the captain of the guard, and there's some dispute about what that means. The Hebrew translates to chief of the butchers or slaughterers, so some scholars think that he was the chief cook or steward in the house of Pharaoh, and other academics believe that it refers to being an executioner, so that would make Potiphar the commanding officer of the royal bodyguard who executed the capital sentences by the king. Ordered by the king. So both positions would be really significant, but if he was the executioner especially, Potiphar would have been really powerful in Egypt. And so things are starting to look better for Joseph. He works hard and he becomes Potiphar's most trusted servant. Multiple times in the scriptures it says, "The Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand." It even says that Potiphar left so much to Joseph that Potiphar didn't even know what he possessed, except for the bread that he ate at night. Joseph took care of everything else. So, in my mind, I think Joseph prospered because he stayed true to himself and his beliefs. He believed in God, and I don't think he hid that fact. He was a Jewish shepherd living with Egyptians, and so I'm sure he stood out. I think he recognized that this gave him advantages. And Jacob was an important man, and I'm sure he taught Joseph how to run an organization efficiently. And Joseph didn't sit around and moan about his troubles. He used his skills to better his situation, and important people took notice. But hang on. Right when things are looking up, Potiphar's wife decides Joseph looks pretty snazzy, and she tries to seduce him. Joseph is loyal to Potiphar and denies the wife many times, but one time she manages to grab his garment as he runs away. So the wife claims that Joseph tried to sleep with her and that he ran away when she cried out. This, of course, makes Potiphar angry, and Joseph is thrown into prison. I think it's so interesting when you look at stories of success. They are often stories of reversals. They say life is like a roller coaster with its ups and downs. I like to think of it like the heartbeat lines on an electrocardiogram. The highs and lows let you know you are alive. Everything seemed to be going great for Joseph, but then he got knocked down even lower. I've definitely experienced that in my life. You think everything is finally okay, and then the ground crumbles under your feet. It's easy to get discouraged, and I'm sure Joseph experienced all the negative feelings you'd expect, but he didn't let life keep him down. In prison, the Lord was still with Joseph, and he prospered. So much so that the keeper of the prison turned the whole management of the prison over to Joseph. Again, he was trusted to handle everything. And during this time, 2 of Pharaoh's servants were sentenced to spend time in prison. The chief butler and the chief baker were both incarcerated at the same time. And during the same night, both the butler and the baker had significant dreams that they were unable to make sense of. When Joseph checked on them the next morning, he noticed they were upset, and you guessed it, he was able to interpret their dreams. It was good news for the butler. Joseph predicted that in 3 days, the Pharaoh would restore him back to his place of honor. And Joseph asked the butler to tell Pharaoh of his innocence and get him released from prison. The baker wasn't so lucky. He asked Joseph to interpret his dream and was told that in 3 days he would be hanged. And everything happened just like Joseph foretold. The baker was executed, and the butler was reinstated in the Pharaoh's court. But the butler forgot about Joseph and didn't mention him to Pharaoh. We don't really know how long Joseph had to wait in prison. We know that he enjoyed more freedom than most in prison, and that the trust he received was remarkable. On the road to success or prosperity, there are often periods of waiting. Sometimes good things have to marinate for a while. But like Tom Petty says, the waiting is the hardest part. Trusting in God's timing is one of the most difficult aspects of faith, but I think it's a critical part of being a believer. I love the quote from Corrie ten Boom, where she says, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." And Joseph is a prime example of that kind of faith. And again, Joseph didn't sulk and despair during his periods of trial. He continued to use his talents and abilities, and that's another feature of faith, continuing to do your best despite difficult circumstances. The scriptures do tell us that it was 2 years after the butler had his experience in prison before the story moves forward. When that time elapsed, Pharaoh had his own momentous dreams. And like others in the tale, Pharaoh is troubled because he doesn't know what the dreams mean. He gets all his magicians and wise men together, but no one is able to help. And then, what do you know? The butler remembers Joseph. So they bring Joseph before Pharaoh, and he interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. And Joseph explains that there will be 7 years of plenty in Egypt, followed by 7 years of famine. And God has given Pharaoh the dreams so he can prepare for the tough years coming. Joseph advises the Pharaoh that he should find a man to organize a food storage plan for the next 7 years so Egypt can survive the following famine. Who do you think the Pharaoh chose for this project? You guessed it. Joseph was put in charge of gathering the grain. But not only that, Pharaoh made Joseph ruler over all of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh himself. Talk about power. And how do you think Joseph was prepared to handle this power and the heavy tasks he was assigned? Well, he was 17 when he was sold into Egypt, and he was 30 when he met the king. So for 23 years, he was being shaped by his experiences and taught how to manage others in different situations. Actually, even before that, because he learned from his father as a child. He learned how to manage Potiphar's household, and he ran a prison. So I think it's a safe bet that Joseph knew how to run things efficiently. Because he trusted in God and because he continued to refine his talents and skills, Joseph was positioned to save thousands of people from starvation. But the story gets even more poignant. All of this time that Joseph was in Egypt, his family continued living their lives in Canaan. But when the famine came, they go to Egypt to get food. And there's quite a bit of back and forth between Joseph and his brothers that I won't go into in this podcast. Ultimately, though, Joseph sees that his initial dreams have come true, and his brothers have bowed down to him as ruler of Egypt. And because of Joseph's faith and endurance through these intense trials, he is the one that saves his family from the famine. Not only that, but Joseph forgives his brothers for their mistreatment of him and acknowledges that his life played out just as it should have. He was truly a wise and honorable man. I know this has been a pretty long story, but it's the best account I know of that reflects what it means to prosper by degrees. And it took place around 2,500 plus years ago. Talk about making an impression on humanity. 3 major religions of the world consider this scripture. But even if you don't believe that, the simple history of Joseph in Egypt is awe-inspiring. I've tried to explain the principles of prospering by degrees along the way, but just as a quick summary. 1, don't blame your circumstances for the results in your life, whether it's the circumstances you're born into or others that you are thrown into along the way. 2, embrace your God-given talents and abilities, even if it seems to make things harder at first. 3, stay true to your beliefs and who you are as a unique child of God. 4, remember that there are usually many reversals on the road to success. In my mind, I imagine switchbacks on a mountain trail. There's a lot of back and forth, but you continue to climb higher and higher. 5, Many times, long periods of waiting are required while experience refines us into who we need to be. 6, it's important to continue to develop our skills and talents during these waiting periods. 7, often people are placed in our path that lead to future connections and opportunities. 8, when we make the most of ourselves, we are positioned to serve others in wonderful ways. I hope you've been able to find value in the podcast today. Sometimes I think it's easy to feel that we are disadvantaged or that our dreams are taking too long to be realized. It's easy to forget that life is a journey and it takes a lot of work to achieve big things. And many times, setbacks are not really setbacks. They're necessary switchbacks on the personal mountains that we all have to climb. When we finally reach the top, I think we'll be able to appreciate the view and see how important all of those switchbacks were. And when we get there, the sight is going to be spectacular. Thanks again for spending some time with me today. I hope you have a great week, everybody, and live the vibrant life.